For a change, I am trying to really discuss a subject which is really very favorite for me since 1993. China, dumping, low price import, chemical, these have been really everyday words for me. In fact, I think we all know that most of the trade remedies are against China. But today I heard about US, and since there was a reference to US, I must say that today probably India is being seen as a threat in US. In fact, in last 1 month we had about 7 fresh initiations in US, couple of which are chemicals. So with these brief words, I'll straight move over to the session and discussions. And to start with Shri Deepankar Aron, with Indian chemicals and petrochemical sector market size projected to reach 300 million by 2025, could you provide an overview of the government initiatives in this sector, especially after a global pandemic some time back, and the challenges that Indian chemical industry keeps facing from unfairly priced Chinese imports? The challenges being faced by Indian industry from Chinese imports are very significantly become unfair in the recent period.
Well, very good evening. Thank you, Mr. Gupta. At the outset, it's a pleasure to be here. I thank the organizers, Center for Digital Economy Policy, Mr. Bhattacharya, and the co-organizers, FIIT. It's double the pleasure for me to be here because 34 years back, I had entered the hallowed portals of this institute as an undergraduate student studying electrical engineering. And as I like to say on a lighter note, I cracked the IIT exam mainly on physics and mathematics. So they knew I wasn't that good in chemistry, so they decided to post me as JS Chemical now, about 6 weeks back. But having said that, I am absolutely stimulated by the enormous opportunities in the field of chemical sectors, and not just in terms of the figures that you were talking about or that we will be talking about, but because these 80,000 molecules, as I think identified by the chemical abstract symmetry, have probably, some of them have resulted in our very origins after the Big Bang, formation of the universe, the amino acids and proteins and DNAs and RNAs. So very fundamental. So I'm absolutely delighted. So the Indian chemical industry, I mean, we have very distinguished members on the panel from leading industries who have served and are serving, but the figures are very astounding. So we are at currently about $220 billion of turnover per year, and we are striving to move towards $300 billion figure probably over the next 4 to 5 years, because our growth rate has been to the tune of about 9.8 to 10% roughly, as also in exports. And we do look forward to touching the figure of $1 trillion US dollars by 2040, because unless we have a vision, a long-term plan like we're talking about Viksit Bharat 2047, 15-year, 25-year, 5-year, and of course immediate goals. So we must have these calibrated approach to our vision. We are the 6th largest chemical industry in the world as a nation. And the 3rd largest in Asia. We were 4th largest, we become the 3rd largest. Our exports are to the tune of about $45 billion, which is again roughly about 8 to 10% of our merchandise exports, insofar as goods are concerned. If we look at the foreign direct investment in the field of chemicals, then the figures I checked this morning, they reveal a very interesting story. We are of all the FDI that has come in different sectors in the country in the financial year FY23, 22-23, chemical sector is 6th ranked. We got close to $1.8 billion of FDI out of a total of about $60 billion. So, and of course the employment potential is enormous, more than 2 million people are employed and many more in the unorganized sector. And significantly, there's a huge ripple effect of the growth in chemical sector. It's not just confined to the $220 billion, but when we look at the user industries, whether it is textiles, whether it is food and because of the flavors and fragrances industry, and so many others, electronics, semiconductor industry. So I think it has a cascading effect, growth in chemical sector in all the other sectors of the economy. So coming and in the exports, we know that we have dyes and pigments. In that sector, we are 2nd biggest in the world. In pesticides and agrochem, we are the 4th biggest in the world. And the potential is even more enormous when we start looking at the next 15 years or 25 years. Now, in this backdrop, talking of initiatives, we had the most famous petroleum, chemical and petrochem investment region scheme that was formulated around 2010, notified 12-13, and since then 3 major cluster-based parks have come up, investment regions have come up, not really parks. So one is the Dahej, Bharuch area in Gujarat, where in fact chemical industry is fairly well concentrated, and then we have in Andhra Pradesh near Vizag. All these are near ports, and then in Odisha near Paradip. And if you look at the amount of investments that have resulted, the figure is an astounding about 3,43,000 crores which has happened in these 3 parks. Of course, it is led by an anchor investor, and that has to be a feedstock company. So we have cracker plants in all these 3. Andhra Pradesh is yet to come up. The other 2 has come up. So this has resulted in employment of about 3.7 lakh people. Now we have another scheme that has been running for some years, the plastic park scheme. And in the plastic park, the focus is on development of the petrochem sector and foster again a cluster-based approach and achieve economies of scale. So there are about 10 parks that have been commissioned under this scheme, in which the central government has given an assistance of up to 50% of the costs of setting up the infrastructure, as also utilities, with a maximum threshold of about 40 crores. And 6 of these parks were set up before 2020. And after the pandemic, we have seen an accelerated action on this front, in as much as 4 new parks have been set up, and these are in the states of Uttarakhand, in a place called Sitarganj. In UP, it has come in Gorakhpur. In Chhattisgarh, it has come in a town called Sarora, and in Karnataka, it has come in Ganjimat. So now coming to the talk of surge in imports, which I know, as you said, Mr. Gupta, is a very important and pertinent topic, and that is the theme of, I believe, this conclave, Atmanirbharta. So first of all, let me mention that the Honorable Union Minister for Chemical and Fertilizer, Shri Mandviya, has already approved our next major event on promoting development of Indian chemical industry, investments into the country, called India Chem, as it enters its 13th biennial edition. It started in 2020 with the inauguration by none other than the Honorable Prime Minister of India, late Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji. So these dates have been announced. I'll like to mention this at this forum as well. 17th to 19th of October at the Bombay Expo area. So this is a unique event where we try and get all stakeholders, the Indian industry, our overseas partners. We try and get forge bilateral meetings between different countries, India and Europe, India and US and others, with whom we have a major exchange on the chemical front. Now, talking of initiatives to contain the surge, we all know what's happened, what US has done recently on the electric vehicle battery, the significant jump in the tariffs to protect the American industry. Obviously, we can't blindly follow suit. We have to have a very, very measured, strategic, calibrated approach, because while we have to strongly encourage Atmanirbharta, at the same time, we have to see that there has to be domestic capacity also. I think that is the fundamental point of debate. And the second point of debate is that we have to encourage competitiveness in the Indian industry. Now, if we follow an approach of completely insulating ourselves, then we run the risk of losing our export competitiveness. In the long run, that may not exactly be in our favor. So we have to have a very nuanced, at the same time, strategic approach. So, the Bureau of Indian Standards has set up standards on various products in various sectors cutting across. So, by virtue of its act called the Bureau of Indian Standards Act 2016. So, we have started issuing quality control orders specifying the norms and specifications which BIS has done, but that is voluntary in nature. It becomes the force of law only when the concerned line ministry notifies it under the Bureau of Indian Standards Act, under Section 16 of the Act. So, in the context of the overall theme of this conference, I'm happy to share that in these last about 4 years, particularly after the pandemic, and realizing the need to combat the surge at one hand and the need to combat spurious, defective, harmful products. Only 2-3 days back we were deliberating on whether we should have mandatory standards on 3 new chemicals, and we found from our colleagues, scientists in the BIS, that if the impurity levels are above a certain threshold, they're carcinogenic. So there are implications on human health, plant health. There are implications on environment, which also have to be addressed suitably. So we have issued quality control orders in 72 cases on 33 chemicals and in 39 petrochemicals, out of which 39 have been implemented, and some studies have been done, particularly on the petrochemical part of these molecules on which these have been imposed, and it has been found that imports in the aftermath of the notification over a period of 1 year have dipped to almost 25 to 60% than what were there before. I'm talking a ballpark figure. So I think this is a work in progress, and we have to be, as I said, a little careful, because it should not lead to disruptions of our supply chains in the country. So now that is where the role of industry also is very important, because we need to get the exact picture of what are our domestic capacities, how are the supply chains functioning, whether domestic capacity is sufficient to meet the need, the demand. So these are the issues. But moving on, we also have taken the initiatives on establishing centers of excellence. And I'm very delighted to say that some of you may perhaps be aware that IIT Delhi has also been declared a center of excellence by the Department of Chemical and Petrochemical a few years back. Now the scheme is broadly, now this is in fact a part of a very important overall agenda, and I'm very delighted that the venue of this conference has been chosen in an academic R&D institution, and which is, the overall theme is collaboration between industry, academia and R&D institutions. While we do have Foundation for Technology Transfer, I believe in IIT Delhi, so almost 3-4 decades back, when I was there as a student, partly supported by IBM, and most of the IITs and R&D institutions have. But when the industry starts looking for that, they want an upgradation in process technology or a research in a new molecule, they, apart from some well-known institutes, they really don't know where to turn to. So we need a platform where we have, all the institutes, not just tier 1, but even tier 2, tier 3. Because if a tier 1 IIT, for example, is requested for a mundane research, which a tier 2, 3 can done, imidacloprid, which is an agro-pesticide, how do we measure that? Because various other molecules, various other types of herbicides, insecticides, fungicides are also clubbed in that. So we need to create more new lines, which we do on the basis of requests from industry and as also our own research. So I'm happy to share 14 new HS lines have been made in the last year, 2023. Again, recognizing the need for fostering Atmanirbharta by proper analysis, so that subsequent trade remedial actions can be contemplated. So I'm going to pause here for a while and hand the mic back to you, Mr. Gupta.
Thank you. In fact, I am reminded of my first experience with you, which was less than 2 weeks of your taking over in chemicals. And I could not believe that it was less than 2 weeks. And I think all of us will agree, it's not less than 6 weeks in chemicals. The way you spoke about what's happening to chemicals, the current problems. But I must share with you that things like demand-supply gap causing any kind of concerns, repeated arguments which keep coming in, I think these are totally unfounded. Any kind of measures which are being taken by government, whether tariff or non-tariff, I am yet to come across situations where there have been really significant damage to the downstream industry. On the issue of HS code which you mentioned, I am aware that the government of India was earlier releasing trade data, which has been now moved to classified. And I think it has done more harm than what it was supposed to really address. So since you are occupying an important position in the government, it's worth considering that why the trade data should not be really released to the industry. It will industry will really do a good watchdog kind of a job. It will give you good inputs in terms of what's happening, what is coming in, where import surges are happening, how unfair pricing is happening. I think it's worth considering that it has not really done any good to the country in terms of prohibiting circulation of that data. Thank you very much for your views. Moving over to Shri Manish Sinha, 70% of India's energy generation at present is coal based. Despite additions of renewable capacities, India is likely to remain heavily coal dependent for meeting its energy demand for decades to come. In fact, this morning I was talking to solar cell industry in terms of robust program we are talking about. They are still not going to be nowhere close to what we have on coal side. Coal mining requires usage of a number of chemicals, and as you would know, ammonium nitrate is one of the key chemicals in that. That means if India needs to achieve energy security, ammonium nitrate availability becomes a key issue. Even though it is less than 3% of total production of coal. In fact, what just now JS Chemical mentioned about demand supply, and the argument which frequently keeps coming in. But we routinely find this kind of a situation that these products are quite insignificant to the downstream industry. Ammonium nitrate is just 3% of the cost. During COVID, we had a panic situation. We were not sure if ammonium nitrate will be available in India due to export restrictions by exporting countries. In Feb 22, Russia, the major exporter of ammonium nitrate to India, imposed a 2-month ban on ammonium nitrate exports, causing a global supply chain disruptions. In your opinion, what should India do to ensure supply chain resilience in ammonium nitrate so that we achieve energy security?
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gupta, for giving me the opportunity to present, share my views. And I am also thankful to Mr. Deji, because through whom I got connected to this forum. As far as ammonium nitrate is concerned, you are very right, sir. It's very, very important chemical, critical chemical for securing the energy of country, because more than 70% of the power is being generated through coal, and coal is being produced through explosives, use of explosives, and explosives are manufactured by ammonium. So in the chain, ammonium nitrate is of utmost importance, and in addition to coal mining, the ammonium nitrate also has its application in infrastructure industries. So the ports, railways, roads, irrigation project, all those are also dependent on explosives is ammonium nitrate. So it's a very important chemical, and I suggest that a list of such critical chemicals should be prepared by government, by the respective department, and government should see that the industries which are manufacturing such critical chemicals are given adequate support. So, like ammonium nitrate in India, the production capacity is almost around 1100 kg as on date, around 1190 to be precise, and further around 900 KTA is under addition this through greenfield projects. Investment of almost 5,000 crore is in the pipeline. But if you see the cause of worry is in the year FY23, there was a surge in import by almost 47% of ammonium nitrate. And next year, means FY24, it was 14% higher than FY23, which led to underutilization of the capacity of domestic Indian manufacturing. And the addition in the capacity has come mainly because of the demand from DPIA, from Ministry of Coal, the end users of explosives like Coal India Limited, Sinha, they have been harping upon for increase in capacity, addition in capacity, especially after COVID, during COVID, and post Russia-Ukraine. So it's very important for government to see that the industry, ammonium nitrate manufacturing industry, gets a equal footing, and they continue to produce, and also they are able to, then only they will be able to invest further to secure the upcoming demand of the country. So here, sir, actually the ammonium, for production of ammonium nitrate, natural gas is the key input item, sir. And if you see, there is Indian players are facing structural disadvantage, sir, because the rate of natural gas in Russia, Middle East, it's about roughly $2 US dollar per MMBTU, whereas for Indian manufacturers it is about 14 to 15 US dollar per MMBTU. So this huge difference, almost by 7 times, makes the industry, Indian domestic industry, uncompetitive. So there is a need to make the ground equal, putting equal, so that the domestic industry is able to compete, and rather I should say it's a level playing ground for the domestic industry, and then let the competition take place with the Russian-based manufacturer or Middle East-based manufacturers. So this may be achieved by imposing an additional BSD, like presently the BSD is about 7.5%, which may be increased to around 20%. So that is increase in the BSD definitely will add cost to the explosive manufacturing. There is no doubt about it. But then what is happening, sir? If you see the impact of increase in the cost of explosives, the explosive manufacturers, when they are doing the selling arrangement with the end users, and Coal India is the largest consumer of explosive in the country, almost 67 to 68% of the explosive is purchased by Coal India. So there is a mechanism of price variation formula. So the cost of any escalation in the price of ammonium nitrate is passed on to the customer. And if you see the impact of increase in BSD on end users, means the mining sector, sir, then there the cost of ammonium nitrate for the blasting work of coal sector or infrastructure is pretty small. For coal sector, it's varying from about 2% to 3% only. It's a very meager cost. And for infrastructure, it's even lower than that. So there will be hardly any increase in the cost of coal production. So the end customer will not have much impact by way of increasing of BSC, but it will definitely give a level, provide a level ground, level field for the domestic manufacturer, and also it will ensure that there is the future investment will continue to flow in the country. So capacity building takes place in the country, so that in crisis time the energy security is not compromised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In fact, this issue of cost increase is to my heart on every product which comes in, and I have very, very different opinion and thinking about it. I am reminded of ammonium nitrate itself. When the price of ammonium nitrate was at peak, the profits of Coal India were also at the peak. So it's really a myth that any kind of basic custom duty or anti-dumping, which I routinely hear, will lead to price increase. In fact, we've seen more than 100 recommendations from DGTR over past 2 years, where DGTR has routinely come back and said that there will be no adverse effect on public at large. So I strongly believe that the cost increase argument is really an argument only, never established. In fact, on the side of natural gas, I think you would be aware of that Europe and US has routinely treated natural gas of Russia as not representing fair market values. In fact, they routinely rejected cost of manufacturing of Russian manufacturers, holding that your natural gas prices are distorted. In fact, US has gone a step ahead and treated Russia as a non-market economy. Whereas there is also a talk going on that why this is not a subsidy. In the context of Middle East, which since you referred, feedstock pricing has been an argument with me for last decade that why dual pricing of feedstock is not a subsidy. So I think there is a need for wider debate by the industry so that it is appreciated by the government. It was still just not getting accepted in the government. The dual pricing of feedstock, how this is really a subsidy. In fact, since Dr. Jaiji talked about Chintan Shivir, we have Chintan Shivir happening on 28-29th on DGTR, where one of the topics is translational subsidies. So these issues are really now repeatedly coming up for discussions. Moving over to Mr. Anand, we all know about penicillin G story, and of course, I frequently talk about it because this is one product where I had worked as a domestic industry, got the duty recommendation from DGTR, was rejected by Ministry of Finance, and the result is known to everybody that we don't have penicillin G today in the country. So how Chinese producers killed Indian industry is known to, I think, government very well now, particularly in chemicals. I think whenever we talk about the ill effects of China, penicillin G is on the top of the table. India used to be self-sufficient in entire supply chain of antibiotics until this dumping attack was unleashed by Chinese producers. Amoxicillin, a widely used penicillin derivative, was dumped by Chinese at a price of $9 to $10 against international price of $25 to $30. I am sure you are aware about it. So manufacturers turned Indian API producers, killing the API industry. The government then imposed DPCO on antibiotics formulations, which led to domestic industry shutting down completely and substituting it with Chinese import. The ironical part is that the prices of antibiotic in India is now back to what it was before the Chinese started destroying our industry. The government has now brought a 32,000 crore PLI incentive to bring back the antibiotic industry to ensure pharma security of the nation. However, we see similar attacks happening across many chemicals, including products such as isopropyl alcohol, which is an essential low-price solvent in many pharma products. What do you think are the challenges? How can industry and government work together to defend our chemical industries?
Since I come from the chemical industry, I just want to start the kind of a quick one. If I say that all of us here are sitting on chemical, will you agree? It's what you're sitting on is the reaction of polyol and isocyanate which make the foam which makes you comfortable. So you are wearing chemical, we are eating chemical, day in and day out we use chemical. So that's the reality of chemical, what brings to the table. But somehow this industry has got a bad name, chemical is bad. We use all the benefit of it, but not really appreciated. Maybe sometime I would say that the trade remedy also comes that way. The local industry makes all the suffering, but when it goes for a support, no, you are the bad guy. So that's what we hear. So I just want to start with that note and tell the IP isopropyl alcohol problem in three parts. First part, isopropyl alcohol is a very, very important chemical for the pharma industry, which goes into manufacturing multiple active pharmaceutical ingredients which will cure your diabetics, to cancer, to antidepressant, even to the popular known remdesivir. So everything IPA is involved. Whatever the tablets you use, without IPA you cannot manufacture those tablets. Right from your crocin, because that gives a tablet coating. That's what the importance of the chemical. With such an important chemical, like whatever Mr. Gupta was telling, all of us know the penicillin G story. Now let's also hear the IPA story. IPA was manufactured in this country for long. It was started by Nosil and it was meeting most of the demand, and some imports were coming from both US as well as Europe. Then we started in 2005. So IPA attained Atmanirbhar in 2005. We were meeting because India was becoming a pharmaceutical hub. So the industry was completely served. Then no issues at all. But there is where the Chinese onslaught starts. So let me just give you some data in terms of what is that onslaught all about. So 2016, Chinese share was 8%. 2017-18, it jumped to 20%. 2018-19, it jumped to 49%. Then it jumped to 57% next year. Then the twist happened. COVID came. Chinese ran away. So the domestic industry has to support the whole country for COVID. All of you should have heard what IPL did during that period. Chinese dropped down to 30%. 2 years, they let us down. COVID was over. Next year they jumped to 64%. So that's the level of impact a particular country or a particular product can create for the local economy. And this, we are playing with a very important product which meets the health of the whole citizens. So then we have no other choice to go to the government telling that, because how they achieve this is purely by predatory pricing. Sell it below cost, in their home market make the margin, in the other market just dump it and kill the industry. What we are looking at a level playing field is that we are not looking at more profits. Make the profits which is good for reinvestment, because that's how you have to keep on reinvesting for the growth. That reinvestment economics is what is more important to make the industry sustainable as well as the Atmanirbhar sustainable. Now come to the third part. So when we go to the ministry, when DGTR, in fact I have a lot of admiration how DGTR works to the depth and the breadth of information they collect. They do a lot of hard work. But the challenge is that when I go to the ministry 3 months, sir, my hand is already cut. Please give me a rescue method. Department will say, no, 3 months I cannot give you anything. Wait for more time. Sir, in the next 3 months my other hand will also be cut. No, I will not depend on what you say. I have to see your hand getting cut, then I will see the data. Because then I have the data to see that your hand is already cut. Sir, it is not enough. Then in 12 months, sir, my other leg is also cut. Okay, now they see that, okay, now let me see your, I think there is some truth in that, because I am seeing all things are cut, let me see what's the truth. Then do all the study, make sure that it is really cut by this person. Then I have to prove that the full cut has happened only by China, because I did not have any inherent internal cut which has been carrying for so long, to prove that what is the level of cut really cut the damage, otherwise whether my hand has fallen automatically. So that kind of proof I have to do. After all this is proven, then DTR also has a responsibility to go to the rest of the world to check, if I fix his hand again, will you have any trouble? Because that's what the public hearing is, right? Then after that, at least will I get a cure, at best I will get a prescription. That's a recommendation. That whether he can be given medicine or operated, DGTR restricts with the recommendation. Now what happens? Now for the pharmacy or the operation theatre, it goes to the Ministry of Commerce or the Ministry of Finance. At least in DGTR I know process what it works. But in the rest of the two areas, I do not know how it works. It's a black box. Whether I need to keep on waiting for the medicine or the surgery endlessly. That's the reality. And why I am putting it in front of this is because all the policy makers are here, as well as the policy influencers here. How can we enable the department to take faster action? I'm not telling they are not taking action. Their hands are tied. That's the reason. So how all of us can make it enabled. So this is where I thought what as an industry pain is, how we can overcome it. I think this is where I want to leave the thoughts.
See, as a trade remedy expert, I would agree with you for certain things, and I will also tell you that whether law is really handicapped. So in terms of the way this entire law works, we keep frequently saying that it's anywhere between 2 to 3.5 years from the time you start suffering and till the time you really get addressed, you seek a remedy or you get the remedy. So the time frame is between 2 years to 3.5 years from the start of dumping. Second point comes, is it really a sort of weakness of the law? And the answer is no. The law does provide for what we call a threat of injury. Law does provide for what we call interim remedies or interim duties. The law does allows imposition of interim duties upon expiry of 60 days. And the law talks of threat of injury. So there is, I don't think law has got any limitations. It's only a question of implementation part of it. And the difficulty over there is that when it comes to domestic industry, because eventually once recommendations are issued, it is the DGTR who becomes answerable. Even I'm sure JS Chemical will ask them how you made this recommendation. So that's what they have to do thereafter. So they have, once their recommendation goes, they become answerable to what has been done. Because of that, the job of domestic industry is to establish the facts. But the job of opposing parties is to just make some allegations and delay the entire process. And that's where the entire problem comes in. The way this law has got implemented in India, and maybe the way courts have understood and accepted the submissions and the writ petitions, DCTR is quite concerned about any case testing the scrutiny of the law. And I think I must also share with you, there are hardly any cases which India has lost. In fact, India has lost no case in WTO so far. And India has lost hardly any cases before the courts. So that's the positive side of what they do. Of course, the negative side is that they take their own time. And yeah, that continues to remain a concern for the industry. But the problem is not the law. The problem is not the government. Problem is only the policy thinking in the government. And how really government thinks of implementing this law, and probably there is a remedy available to that. So with these brief words, I move over to Mr. Soutrik Ganguli. I don't know whether he has the same stories to talk about. As we know, PVC is a critical to about 30% of India's GDP. Of course, we are talking about chemical being everywhere. I do agree with you, but it's not getting appreciated. And in fact, once I was with the DGTR, and I was slightly upset why things were taking time. And he said, the DG said that why should I really bother? Because your admin ministry is really not bothered at all. I am a government officer as the chemical ministry is. And you show me a single recommendation from chemicals saying that this industry is suffering and I recommend the duties. And he said, then I'll show you steel. I think it's probably worth for you to note. And he said, I'll show you steel, every steel case, as soon as there's an application, and before there's an application, there's a recommendation from Minister of Steel to take an action. And he said, because I hold a lot of personal interactions with these people, that from under secretary to under secretary, and secretary to secretary, and joint secretary to joint secretary, minister to minister, there's a direct interaction in terms of what's happening and why it's taking time. But when it comes to steel ministry is not really so much supporting their own industry, and if that is so, chemical ministry. And if chemical ministry itself has not been supporting, why should we really bother? In fact, thereafter I had gone to chemical secretary, made this request, it was appreciated, and thereafter a couple of recommendations were sent by chemical ministry that the facts of the case just does justify imposition of duties. So in case of PVC, which is another backbone, 30% of India's GDP, it is critical for agriculture, construction, healthcare, automobile and so on. With India's economy galloping ahead of to become a $7 trillion industry by the end of this decade, how well positioned is the PVC industry to support our economy? What are the steps being taken by this industry, or will we be ending up importing increasingly higher volumes of PVC from China and other countries? Would we continue to have the tag of being the world's largest PVC importer? I do hate to say that, but I have seen myself how it is happening for last 2 decades, having been associated from practically first case of PVC suspension resin. When can the government intervene in this, in your opinion, Mr. Ganguli?
Good evening. Sitting in IIT, it seems only fair that in the interest of full disclosure, let me first admit that I am not an engineer. I am supposed to talk about PVC. Perhaps I won't be able to tell you much about the molecule that you don't already know. but maybe I can tell you a thing or two about how the business of that molecule is conducted in India, across the world, and how it connects with the bigger picture, what it means for India as a nation. There are 80,000 chemicals, Joint Secretary said. I agree. Among all of this, PVC is the material for nation building. Wherever new India is being built, India is taking shape. Water, sewage, water conveyance is happening, be it Jal Jeevan Mission, be it rural electrification, be it Jan Awas Yojana. Wherever new India is taking shape, you cannot deny the incontrovertible role of these. It is there. Without it, it's not possible. Yeah. Mr. Gupta mentioned a whole host of products. I mean, there are some lesser known applications of PVC also. There are certain very critical applications. For example, the blood bags, PVC. The catheter tubings, PVC. But 70% of PVC goes for piping, predominantly for water conveyance. And in a country like India, where still agriculture remains the predominant source of livelihood, whether we want it or not, if our economic aspirations have to transform into reality, this is one sector which perhaps cannot be denied. In all critical sectors of the economy, PVC has a role to play. Having said that, India has a vibrant PVC processing industry. We produce virtually everything that can be made from it. And that brings me to a few statistics. I don't want to try and intimidate you or bombard you with numbers, but I'm just mentioning a few numbers because that will put the thing in perspective. India is the only country in the world with such a large PVC processing industry which is actually deficit in PVC. All other countries, China for example, has 11 million ton of PVC surplus. US 5 million tons. Taiwan about 1.3 million ton. Japan almost 0.9 million ton. Each of these countries, they have a very vibrant PVC processing industry like that of India. But the only difference with India is that India somehow ends up importing almost 3 million tons of PVC. This year for the April-February period is 2.7 million metric tons. If we consider the full financial year, I'm sure it will catch it. I mean, one single commodity, 3 million tons imported, roughly valued at $2.5 billion. Today only, I just read in the newspaper that our trade deficit has now rose up to $19.1 billion for the last month. PVC imports, I'm sure, has a sizable contribution towards that. Now, I want you to remember this number 2.7 million metric. This is the kind of deficit which is there in the country. And the last greenfield capacity addition in this country for PVC has taken place almost a decade and a half back. During all these years, the deficit in PVC has kept on increasing without any fresh capacity coming up. Petrochemical capacity, to my mind, and it's widely acknowledged also, usually latches on to two things. Either if there is a feedstock advantage, you have a raw material advantage, so capacity comes up around that based on that advantage, or if you have a market. In case of PVC, the market is more than self-evident. Of a 4 million ton demand, 2.7 million ton being imported, so the need for new capacity perhaps is yelling from the tower. But despite that, we haven't had any capacity. Why is that? Number one, poor reinvestment economics. the spread between the intermediate and the PVC finished product does not ensure a healthy reinvestment economics, does not make it attractive enough for diverting investment from other molecules to this molecule. There are other issues which kind of added to it. For example, India, the FTAs that India has signed, they have exacerbated the problem really. I just mentioned that Japan has about 880 kg of PVC surplus. Half of it is exported to India, taking advantage of the India-Japan CIPA. Similarly, Korea, the CIPA, Korea CIPA does not have a concession on PVC, but despite that, more than half of exportable surplus in Korea is actually exported to India. The point of saying all this is that while India has not seen any new capacity creation, overseas exporters are exporting to the extent that justifies setting up a global scale plant only to supply to India. Now let me come to China. Out of this 2.7 million metric ton of PVC imported into India, 1/3 has come from China, roughly 900 kg, 0.9 million metric ton. And this part is a relatively recent phenomenon. Post February 2022, we have seen as part of imports from China. February 2022 is the time when the anti-dumping duty on PVC lapsed, and post that there has been a steady, and there's been no stopping China after that. Now, that brings me to the third point, which is perhaps important if we intend to nurture this critical industry, which is the extremely robust and streamlined trade remedy system. I mean, a lot has been said here about the efficiency or the lack of it in the trade remedy system, but it is undeniable that often the trade remedy, when it's available, it's either too little, too late, or it's not even too little, it's never available. But what is happening despite that is that Indian industry is cognizant of the criticality of this material. If India's economic aspiration has to transform into reality, then PVC is a value chain where security of supply is a key essential, a prerequisite for India going forward. So, industry has planned new investments. Earlier, and PVC duty used to be 7.5%, which did not justify new investment because the reinvestment economics didn't work out. In 2019, it was increased to 10%. The moment it was increased, more than 3.5 million ton of new PVC capacity was announced by domestic players, including the company that I represent. Then comes May 2022, the duty was rolled back to 7.5%. All those capacities which were announced went into back burner. Now we have come to a situation where the deficit is ballooning to such an extent that despite the reinvestment economics not working out, simply to maintain the security of supply, some of us are going ahead with our investment plans. The 3.5 million ton that I mentioned, new capacity, some of it is going to come, including from some new players like IndianOil and all, who are not into PVC but are taking an entry into that. However, the last point that Mr. Gupta had mentioned is that what support do we need from the government? Three basically. That considering the criticality of this industry, do a little hand-holding to ensure a healthy reinvestment economics. Please consider an upward revision of duty, especially because this goes into areas like agriculture, infrastructure, which kind of are big components of India's development agenda. Secondly, I mean, today's import is absolutely unregulated. Bring some kind of an order to that, if possible. How can we do that? You yourself had answered it in your opening comments. by having a robust quality control system, which would at least regulate imports if not restrict it. And third is, to the extent possible, please streamline the existing trade remedy system so that it acts in sync with the industry and when the industry needs it the most, rather than putting the entire burden of proof on the industry and keep on demanding that first you die, then I'll establish that you have been injured in the past. Thank you so much.
Since you mentioned about robust system of DGTR, I think one point which I can say through this platform is in this kind of situation, probably it is quite appropriate to invoke MIP. Already chemical has been working on MIP on couple of products. In this kind of product, the industry is suffering so heavily, and it is very clear that the investigation will take time. Probably chemicals could consider invoking MIP for short period. We are not talking about MIP for long period, but till such time the trade remedy action results into action by Ministry of Finance. If till such time MIPs could be introduced in such situations where industry is suffering so severely, probably it would be a remedy to the industry, because DGTR process cannot really be curtailed to a significant degree. Even if they start recommending interim measures, it would be hardly saving 3 months or so. It will still be more than a year before industry can get something. So maybe introduction of MIP could be one solution in such situations. Second, in terms of too little, yes, a point which is very relevant to particularly PVC. PVC is a product where the orders are lost with a price difference of 500 rupees. I think I am right. In a product going for 60,000 rupees, 20,000 rupees, an order will be lost for 500 rupees. That's a commodity nature of this product. And we have got a long history where Koreans will come and establish or claim that there is no dumping. And DGTR will issue a recommendation saying that there is no dumping by Koreans. I have never understood how it is possible in a commodity product like PVC that the Korean manufacturers have sold the product at a price where ex-factory price for domestic and export is almost the same. More than 2% becomes de minimis under dumping law. And if they are getting zero duty, they are establishing 0.5 to minus 0.5% of dumping margin, which means that ex-factory price for domestic market and export market for one long year for a commodity product was the same, and it's simply unbelievable. So I would certainly agree with what Mr. Ganguli said in terms of too little. It's really worth checking what's happening. The records are in Korean languages, it's a foreign territory, there are limitations of really investigating authorities. Under those circumstances, it becomes all the more important to really look at this seriously. That what is the stopgap arrangement between the trade remedy becomes effective. These brief things, moving over from specific products to Mr. Ashwani Mahajan. I know you have suggested the term Atmanirbhar to the government. You heard from the industry about the challenges to Atmanirbharta linked to unfair trade practices of other countries. As a trade remedy expert, I have experienced first-hand reluctance of the machinery to invoke trade remedy measures such as ADD, CVD for defending our industries in the manner it is invoked by other countries such as US, Europe, and even countries such as China and GCC. In fact, GCC probably has been the most recent entrant on trade remedies, who is now far more aggressive than India. For last few years, we have been struggling on getting interim duty relief, while there are almost like routine procedures in other countries. In fact, no questions are asked in US and Europe that why interim duty should be imposed. But in India, first question is asked why there is a need for interim duty. In fact, I can share with all of you that today a debate is going on in Directorate, and I don't know what's going to be one of the topics for that Chintan Shivir, that should India be recommending interim measures as a matter of practice in all the cases, or should there be a specific parameter where the government will consider interim measures. But if you look at any other country, they would simply not even think of it. There is a laid-down time limits. Within those time limits, interim duties will come in. What needs to be done to accelerate the legitimate trade remedy support for the Indian industry in general and for the Indian chemical industry in particular, so that we have greater Atmanirbhar, supply chain resilience, job protection, capacity production, capacity addition. Mr. Mahajan.
धन्यवाद गुप्ता जी, बड़ा अच्छा लग रहा है। सबसे पहले तो हमने दीपांकर जी को सुना कि किस प्रकार से केमिकल इंडस्ट्री के बारे में सरकार चिंता कर रही है। फिर इंडस्ट्री के लोगों से उनकी स्पेसिफिक समस्याओं को लेकर के कोल इंडस्ट्री की बात है या पीआईएस की बात है या पीवीसी की बात है। मैं यहाँ पर थोड़ा सा आपको पीछे लेके जाना चाहूँगा कि ये जो ट्रेड रेमेडीज की बात आ रही है, ये बात ही ना आए यदि हम डब्ल्यूटीओ को ठीक प्रकार से भारत में इम्प्लीमेंट करें। क्योंकि डब्ल्यूटीओ के बारे में लगातार इस संगठन से मैं आता हूँ, लगातार हम चर्चा कर रहे हैं। आपको मैं यहाँ पर 1995 में लेकर के जाऊँगा कि जब डब्ल्यूटीओ इम्प्लीमेंट किया गया 1 जनवरी 1995 तो ये बात आई कि जो डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज हैं, they have been making use of many trade remedies, including the quantitative restrictions, tariffs and so on. Therefore, they should be treated differently. And higher tariffs were allowed to them to the extent of, on an average, 40% average weighted tariff was allowed to India. We continued with though little lower than that, but till 2004, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee limited power, the average weighted tariff was around 24%. Till that time, our industry was not so much affected, whether it was API or chemicals or others. But suddenly, without giving any notice, the next government suddenly reduced the average weighted tariff to 6%. Can you believe industry to survive by a sudden decline from 24% to 6% average weighted tariff? The argument was, I can't say silly, but the argument was that we have to open our economy and our basic objective is to provide cheaper goods to the consumers. If consumers are getting cheaper goods, why people are objecting to it? Why industry should object to it? Why should not we keep on importing from China? And we have seen the result. 90% of the APIs we were producing, 10% we were importing. Today, 90% we are importing, 10% we are producing. What does it mean to us? What does it mean to our health security? We can understand. And the government of that day never gave any heed to this.
as a nationalist, I feel pained at this. Why that has happened? And the result is before us. From 2004 onwards, we see the deindustrialization in this country. Not one, not chemical. Every industry, whether it was the electronic industry, telecom industry, mobiles, textile, paper. You talk of any industry, and the government of the day was, at that day, was sleeping over it. Every 2.5 years, the imports from China were doubling. Nobody raised any alarm, not even the industry. Anybody would be at pain. Industrialists can survive, but the country cannot. Therefore, we do not expect anything from the industry per se. So that is the reason why Swadeshi Jagran Manch was made, to raise alarms on these things. And when Narendra Modi ji took over, he announced the policy of Make in India, but the very ingredients which were required in the policy making were missing at that point of time. The Niti Aayog was being headed by a person who believed in the free trade, lower tariffs, continuation of the lower tariffs, and we did not do anything about the tariffs. It was for the first time in 2018 February when Arun Jaitley ji during his budget speech had said that we are raising tariffs, though only for a few products he raised from 10% to 20% to protect the domestic industry. That was the first time that any government document had said in so many words that we are trying to protect the domestic industry by raising tariffs. Because till that time, 28 years, it was like a crime talking about the protection of industry. You please correct me if I am wrong. And from that point onwards, you see the results. You just raised tariffs from 10% to 20%, and not even 24%, which were there earlier. Just 10% to 20% for a few items, and those few items have done wonder. Today we are exporting approximately $15 billion of mobile phones just by raising tariffs. We didn't do that for others. It was only after, though efforts were made, in February budget tariffs were raised, and in July tariffs were raised on textile, in August tariffs were raised on the garments, in September, October again the tariffs were raised on white goods. But till we reached COVID-19, nothing happened. It was only during COVID-19 that we could realize that we don't have even the face mask with us. Kits, medical equipments. Then the government realized that we have to do something, and that is what Atmanirbhar Bharat is. Atmanirbhar Bharat is not about raising tariffs. It is not about imposing trade remedies. It is about making efforts to make our country capable enough to face the world. I tell you, recently, while talking about this trade remedies, I'm not just limiting myself to the chemical industry, but the chemical industry is also a part of the whole story. We came to know that 70 or about 120 items were given this anti-dumping duties orders from DGTR, and on 70, Finance Minister said no, we are not going to give. That really pushed me to go deep into this whole issue, and I took one item and I found that industry, Indian industry, which is facing problems, is more efficient than the industry overseas. The anti-dumping duty they were asking for was hardly 5%, and they were 8% more efficient than the foreign industry. And why they were facing problems? Because of the high tariffs, high electricity tariffs, cesses, and other kinds of expenses. So the government has to look at it in a more proactive manner. It is not the industry's duty to every time tell the government to go for ADD or other things, and then everything is looked into and सब बातचीत हो जाती है, वहाँ सब प्रूफ्स भी दे दिए जाते हैं, DGTR ऑर्डर भी कर देता है. I requested the Nebula ji to look into this. We have done for one, you for rest of the 69 you do. This is, after all, if we really want to make our India Atmanirbhar, without making proactive efforts, we cannot achieve that. Coming back to this chemical industry, though we had been studying and reading about chemical industry, I went deep into the problems of chemical industry when this pesticide management bill was to be brought. It was all about 27 items which were to be restricted or banned. I'm not going into that discussion. हमें देखने को पता चला कि कोई इंपोर्टर्स हैं, उनको टेक्निकल रजिस्टर कराने की जरूरत नहीं है. यहाँ के मैन्युफैक्चरर को है, वो मजे से इंपोर्ट करते हैं, यहाँ का मैन्युफैक्चरर बैठा हुआ है. कितने ऑफ पेटेंट हो गए, लेकिन उनकी डोमेस्टिक प्रोडक्शन शुरू नहीं हुई है. आखिर क्यों? What stops you? Then we suggested a few changes in the pesticide management bill, but that bill could not see the light of the day till date. Issues are very many. Issues are with every industry. Trade remedies, as per my research, anti-dumping duties may be effective only in the short run, that too only to the extent of 50%. In the medium term and the longer term, anti-dumping duties are not effective. The only solution lies in raising of tariffs.
But again, as our panelist has already said, that the problem is also with the regional trade agreements, FTAs. I feel proud to say that we were the ones who had objected to ourselves. And as a result of that, our industry, our dairy, our agriculture could be saved to a great extent. And I am very thankful to the Prime Minister that despite all pressures, domestic and international, he rose and said that my conscience is not aligned to sign this as. We are hearing about renegotiation of ASEAN and other FTAs, but nothing is happening. That is all belonging to the previous regimes on which we can't say anything right now. But I think the problem is very deep. Though with regard to Atmanirbhar Bharat, we are on the very, very right track. We are making all-out efforts. We have answered all the queries that Atmanirbhar Bharat is the best path forward. There is no doubt about it. जो लोग ये कहते थे कि आत्मनिर्भर भारत को पीछे ले जाने की एक साजिश हो रही है, जो लोग ये कहते थे कि आत्मनिर्भर भारत से हमारी इंडस्ट्री जो है वो पिछड़ जाएगी, कंपटीशन में नहीं रहेगी, मुझे लगता है कि आत्मनिर्भर भारत एक ऐसा रास्ता है जो हमें ये भी बता रहा है कि आप कोई भी तरीका अडॉप्ट करो। अमेरिका को जरा सा सेक लगता है तो तुरंत चाइना पर स्पेशल ड्यूटी लगा देते हैं। अभी हाल फिलहाल में ईवी पर जो उन्होंने एक्शन लिया है वो भी हमने देखा है। ये बात सही है कि WTO जब साइन किया गया तो हमें बराबरी का अधिकार नहीं दिया गया। अमेरिका को तो अधिकार दे दिया कि वो कंट्री स्पेसिफिक टैरिफ लगाए, लेकिन भारत को क्यों नहीं मिला? ये बात भी WTO में हमें उठाने की जरूरत है। हमें भी चाहिए कि हम कंट्री स्पेसिफिक टैरिफ लगा सकें, हम क्यों ना लगाएं? और RCEP में तो हम चाइना से बच गए। मुझे लगता है चाइना से अगर बचना है ठीक तरीके से तो इंडस्ट्री को भी पूरी तरह से जो सरकार को इनपुट्स देने चाहिए वो देने चाहिए और वोकली बात करनी चाहिए। मैं कई बार बहुत मुझे बुरा लगता है, इंडस्ट्री के लोग हमारे पास आते हैं, हम कहते हैं कि आप भी तो कुछ बोलिए। नहीं, आप हमारे लिए बोलिए, हम तो बोलेंगे, लेकिन इंडस्ट्री को भी अपने इनपुट्स, ये सरकार जो है बड़ी रिसेप्टिव सरकार है, मैं ये यहाँ कहना चाहता हूँ। हम जो भी सुझाव देते हैं वो हाईएस्ट लेवल से लेकर नीचे तक वो पूरी तरह से इम्प्लीमेंट होते हैं। अगर गूगल में हमारी चिट्ठियाँ उठा करके देख लीजिए, जितने पत्र हमने प्रधानमंत्री जी को या किन्हीं मंत्रियों को लिखे हैं उन सबको हमने देखा है कि उसके उत्तर मिले हैं, उसका निराकरण हुआ है उन समस्याओं का। इसलिए इंडस्ट्री को भी जरूर अपने विषयों को उनके सामने रखना चाहिए। मुझे खुशी है इस बात की कि आज इसकी चर्चा हो रही है, और मुझे खुशी है इस बात की कि अभी केमिकल इंडस्ट्री में, एग्रो केमिकल में हम ट्रेड सरप्लस हो रहे हैं, फार्मास्यूटिकल में हम ट्रेड सरप्लस हो रहे हैं। अब पता नहीं पीवीसी में भी हम कब ट्रेड सरप्लस होंगे, तो ये समय बताएगा। लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि मैं रिलायंस के प्रतिनिधि यहाँ पर बैठे हैं, आपसे ये भी निवेदन करूँगा कि आप और आपके जैसे दूसरे लोग इन्वेस्टमेंट्स करें। और मुझे बहुत खुशी है इस बात की कि हमारा रिसर्च ये बता रही है कि जहाँ जहाँ हमारे पास डाटा मिला सीएमआई कैपेक्स का, वहाँ हमने देखा है कि 10 गुना से लेकर 100 गुना तक ज्यादा इन्वेस्टमेंट्स की अनाउंसमेंट्स हुई हैं पिछले 3 सालों में, उससे पहले के 3 सालों की तुलना। हर क्षेत्र में, चाहे वो ड्रग्स हैं, चाहे वो इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स हैं, चाहे वो फूड इंडस्ट्री है, सब में इन्वेस्टमेंट्स हमें बहुत ज़्यादा आ रही हैं। तो भविष्य जो है वो उज्जवल है, इतना मैं जरूर कह सकता हूँ। लेकिन सरकार को भी इसके लिए दिन रात काम करना पड़ेगा और इंडस्ट्री को भी इसके लिए दिन रात काम करना पड़ेगा। और मैं यहाँ पर खासतौर पर जयदीप जी का धन्यवाद करना चाहता हूँ कि उन्होंने इस महत्वपूर्ण विषय पर इस सारे को हमारे समाज सामने लाने का प्रयास किया। धन्यवाद।
Thanks, Mr. Mahajan. You have really touched a very, I would say, emotional subject for me. It was having handled more than 1,000 investigation and having faced more than 2/3 rejections in this period you're talking about. I have been personally witness to what has happened in this period. But what I want to say is that you have talked of why not give protection. In fact, we were not even talking protection. The word we are using is trade remedies. You are only looking for remedy and not a protection. Even the remedy was being denied.
यहाँ मैं ये कहना चाह रहा हूँ कि why not protection? हम अपनों की प्रोटेक्शन ही तो मांग रहे हैं। कोई हम अंग्रेजों की प्रोटेक्शन मांग रहे हैं क्या? हम तो अपने लोगों की प्रोटेक्शन मांग रहे हैं। और जहाँ हमने प्रोटेक्शन दिया वहाँ हम इंडस्ट्री लीडर, दुनिया के लीडर बने। ऑटोमोबाइल में आज हमारी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग का 50% ऑटोमोबाइल से आता है। क्यों आता है? क्योंकि हमने उसको प्रोटेक्शन दिया और आज वो किसी भी देश के साथ कंपटीशन करने के लिए तैयार है। इस समय $2,000 की गाड़ी कोई नहीं बना सका दुनिया में, हमने बना के दिखाई। टेस्ला से सस्ती गाड़ी हमारे 3 बालकों ने मिलकर के बनाती है। इट इज ऑल बिकॉज ऑफ द प्रोटेक्शन। अगर आप टेस्ला को अलाउ कर दो यहाँ पर लोअर टैरिफ पर, तो सारी इंडस्ट्री यहाँ की जो ईवी इंडस्ट्री बंद हो जाएगी। इसलिए व्हाई नॉट प्रोटेक्शन? आई एम आस्किंग दिस क्वेश्चन।
I will answer this question. Why not protection? Because when I met these policy makers on this issue, the answer given was, you want us to take us back to ambassador days? So I don't want to use the word protection. That was the answer I got.
आप उनको हमारे सामने रख दीजिए, कभी कुछ नहीं बोलेंगे।
You did ask why industry doesn't want to come forward. In fact, I think we discussed this topic also, why industry doesn't want to come forward. There is a reason for that. In fact, when you talk about basic customs duty, since we have the comment also here, nothing prevents us from raising our customs duty today. There is no WTO bar to us. We are free because we are way below WTO. Today we have WTO plus. We have given some commitments, we have gone much below that level. So nothing prevents us. In fact, that could be one way wherever there is an incidence of dumping happening. In fact, because I keep interacting with DGTR, once he said that Gupta ji, तो फिर आप perennial duty मांग रहे हैं. Now, sir, please recommend customs duty then. If you feel that you cannot give basic customs duty, anti-dumping duty, despite your own investigation establishing dumping and injury, and if you feel that's happening for a long period, then please recommend to Ministry of Finance that customs duty should be enhanced. The point is that you have examined, investigated and found that the industry is suffering. You have established that it is unfair trade practice happening. In fact, that is where last 5 years we have switched the word from protection to remedies. And we are even today really looking for remedy to be given. But to tell you, the current situation is very different. I don't know how far you are updated, but I am updated as on today. So from about 23, around May onwards, we have almost 100% acceptance by Ministry of Finance, barring one textile raw material. So I would say a lot of efforts in that, probably including the efforts which you made. But today Ministry of Finance has recognized that there is a need of the situation. The trade agreement of course remains a very big issue. Efficiency issue which you raised, in fact I am also a strong advocate of that. In fact I have been repeatedly saying that there is no evidence that Indian industry is inefficient as compared to exporters. We have been repeatedly saying, and I have been showing to them that you can examine the data. But if raw material price in India is higher than, let's say, China, if the tariffs are higher in India on raw materials than other countries, if the power tariff is higher in India, then nothing can be done by the industry. If the infrastructure cost is higher, it's higher. But if you look at factors of production within control of industry, I have repeatedly seen and shown that Indian industry is not less efficient than the foreign producers. And despite that, we have been suffering. With these brief words, lot of education from what you said today, and I do agree with you on several points. We will come and meet you in person, that how do we jointly take this agenda further. Moving over to other issue, Mr. Kaul, the refrigerant industry is getting threatened with imports of spurious gases. We heard from GS Chemical also today, that have led to fire accidents across India. How is this affecting the domestic refrigerant industry? What needs to be done to curtail this?
Thank you, Gupta ji. I represent Refrigerant Gas Manufacturers Association. We produce a range of refrigerant gases and other chemicals. These refrigerant gases are required to be used in refrigeration and air conditioning industry. India today is self-sufficient in meeting its refrigerant needs and is also a very large exporter of these gases to the world. We are the third largest producers and exporters of refrigerant gases in the world today. So to that extent, I think industry has developed huge production capacities in India and catering to the other countries as well. Now coming to the issue of spurious gases, this has been happening for the last 2-3 decades. But recently we realize, our air conditioners use a refrigerant called R22. Most of our air conditioners use R22 as refrigerant gas. And R22 gas is regulated under the Montreal Protocol, and it is not allowed to be imported. It's a restricted item for import. And we find, last 1.5 years, cheap imports of another refrigerant coming into India. The refrigerant is R152A. Now, when we started researching as to where it is, needed, and we found it has application only in 2 sectors, foam blowing agent in 2 sectors only, and not as a refrigerant. And then we realized that against a requirement of about 1,000 tons in the country, actual use of that 152A, about 5,000 tons of this gas has got imported into India. And then we realized that the balance 4,000 is getting used in this gas, it's used as R22 in all our air conditioners which go for refilling in the secondary market. So it has resulted into many accidents. Many accidents have been reported. There was an accident in Navy ship also. And now the problem is R152A is a flammable refrigerant, and it's not technically suitable to be used in air conditioners as refrigerant in replacing R22. So it has resulted into many accidents, and so it has become a big public safety hazard as well. You would not know, you call a mechanic to fill your air conditioner at home, you don't know what gases are going into it. So, and this is a flammable gas, and it could spoil your equipment. It will, in next 2-3 months, they look at head pressure. So they will try to achieve that pressure. And they will show you, see head pressure is coming. They mix cocktail of gases and they will show you, itna aa raha hai. 120 या जो भी आ रहा है, and then within 2-3 months your efficiencies will go down and the equipment will go down. Now, so this has become really a big public safety problem. Besides, it is impacting domestic industry. We have invested huge capacity to the extent that this 4,000 tons is getting used in disguise as R22. So our production capacities go into enforced idleness, so threatening our investments. So this is a big problem. So now R152A is imported against an import license under the Monte Protocol Treaty. All these items are supposed to be licensed. Now the problem is anybody can apply for a license and he gets the license for R152. There is no actual end use certification or end use condition in the So we are in touch with the government, Ministry of Environment, Chemicals, and under India Coaling Action Plan we have raised this issue of spurious refrigerant, and government is definitely sensitized on this issue, and we have requested Government of India to immediately start end use condition in the import license, and it should be imported only by end users. That is one way of immediately controlling this menace. Secondly, we have also requested for a quality control order. There is a range of refrigerants, so there is no BI standard on these refrigerants, new refrigerants. So, and under India Coaling Action Plan, once we raised this issue of spurious refrigerants, I think Secretary Environment was kind enough to say that you must have this quality control, standard. And then I'm happy to say that our association along with BIS is working on this, and maybe next 5-6 months we will come out with a new refrigerant. So that is one way of tackling this issue. Another problem is, when these gases are imported into India, there is no mechanism with the customs to test these gases. There is no independent testing lab available in India to confirm that it's a genuine R152A or it's something else. So this is another big problem. So we have also requested for creating a facility where it could be certified for genuineness. Although industry we do have labs, but then you need independent labs to confirm. So I think we have started working on these issues, but this is a big menace impacting our industry.
Thank you. So since we are getting very close to the deadline already, only 2 more points. One to Mr. Mahajan first, and then to GSK. First, Mr. Mahajan, you have been, as I said, champion of Atmanirbhar. What do you think is the disconnect between the industry ask and the response from government? Why is there mistrust on Indian private sector? I think you also said that. Is Indian industry excessively demanding and looking for remedies? What needs to be done to bridge the gap between industry's expectations and government action?
Industry, I can't say that there is a mistrust in the industry for the government, but ऐसा नहीं कि भाई इंडस्ट्री को सरकार पर विश्वास नहीं, लेकिन वो एक कहावत है कि भाई जो दूध का जला जो है वो छाछ को भी फूंक फूंक कर पीता है। तो जब इंडस्ट्री इन्वेस्टमेंट्स करती है, खासतौर पर मैंने अहमदाबाद, गुजरात, बाकी जगह पर मैं गया, जब आत्मनिर्भर भारत की बात आ रही थी, तो एपीआई इंडस्ट्री को वापस लाना है। पेनिसिलिन जी तो एक एग्जाम्पल है, बाकी और बहुत सारे एग्जाम्पल्स हैं। हमने लगभग 42 प्रोडक्ट लाइन्स को चुना आत्मनिर्भर भारत के लिए। तो इंडस्ट्री के लोग बस इतना ही चाहते हैं कि कहीं ऐसा ना हो कि हम लोग इन्वेस्टमेंट कर दें और फिर चाइना डंपिंग करनी शुरू कर दे और आप कुछ रोको नहीं, जैसे पहले हुआ। क्योंकि इंडस्ट्री का तो कोई दोष नहीं था ना। जब चाइना ने $9 में पेनिसिलिन जी डंप करना शुरू कर दिया $22 के मुकाबले में, जैसे आपने बताया, और उसके बाद $35 कर दिया एक्सप्लॉइट करने के लिए, वो एक्सट्रैक्शन चलती रही, और फॉलिक एसिड में 14 गुना कर दिया, बाकी जगह भी ऐसे ही किया। तो इंडस्ट्री का ये कहना बहुत वाजिब है कि भाई दोबारा से तो नहीं हो जाएगी। मैं एक एग्जांपल बताता हूँ। रजू भाई शराफ हैं यूपीएल के, तो उनसे एक बात कर रहे थे कि उन्होंने एक सोडियम साइनाइड का एक प्लांट लगाया, आप लोग जानते ही होंगे। तो जो मार्केट रेट था, चाइना ने फिर उस पर उससे कहीं कम पर डंपिंग करना शुरू कर दी था, उनका जो प्लांट है वो चलने से पहले ही बंद हो जाए। तो ऐसे में, और उन्होंने ट्रेड रेमेडीज मांगी तो 2.5% की टैरिफ सरकार ने शुरू में कहा। तो हमारा ये कहना है कि चाइनीज डंपिंग को रोकने का एक हमारे पास जैसे सीबीआई ईडी है ना, उसी प्रकार का एक ट्रेड इंटेलिजेंस एजेंसी होनी चाहिए जो ये देखती रहे कि भी कहाँ डंपिंग हो रही है। ये नहीं कि भाई वो यूपीएल एप्लीकेशन देगा या हमारे एपीआई वाले देंगे या रिलायंस वाले देंगे या कोई और देगा एप्लीकेशन, फिर उस पर 10 और 6 महीने चर्चा होगी, साल भर में उसके बारे में, ट्रेड रेमेडीज के बारे में, एंटी डंपिंग ड्यूटी के लिए निर्णय आएगा, फिर वो फाइनेंस के पास जाएगा, फाइनेंस कैन से यस और से नो। दिस इज नॉट द केस, ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए। तो एक ट्रेड इंटेलिजेंस एजेंसी ऑन द लाइंस ऑफ ईडी, सीबीआई होना चाहिए। और जैसे ही हमें लगे डंपिंग हो रही है, क्योंकि इट इज ऑल अबाउट योर इंडस्ट्री, आपने 1000 करोड़ रुपया लगा दिया और इंडस्ट्री बंद पड़ी है, और 3-4 साल बंद हो गई तो रस्ट खा गई, काम खत्म, जैसा कि एपीआई इंडस्ट्री के साथ हुआ भी। तो हमारा ये कहना है कि इंडस्ट्री जो है वो बिल्कुल सही है, जो हालांकि गवर्नमेंट भी बहुत एक्टिवली काम कर रही है, लेकिन मुझे लगता है कि वी हैव टू गो ए वन स्टेप अहेड बाय स्टार्टिंग ए ट्रेड इंटेलिजेंस एजेंसी व्हिच कैन टेक क्विक एक्शन। जैसे ही यहाँ पर डंपिंग वाला माल उतरा, वैसे ही अलार्म ऑन, और सब लोगों को पता चल गया, और डीजीटीआर एक्शन ले, फाइनेंस एक्शन ले, जिसने भी लेना है, विद इन ए फ्यू डेज वो हो जाना चाहिए। इतना समझता हूँ।